Hi everyone, my name is Allison Ardress and I'm the coordinator in transition programs for family programs. And today we are going to be talking with the Disability Resource Center, and welcome to our family chat. We hold it about every month and we talk about information that might be really useful or helpful for families to know about. So I'm going to pass this information to have Jen tell us a little bit about herself. This is Jennifer Uber. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am the Assistant Director for Student Learning in the Disability Resource Center. I have been here almost a year at UNCW, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions and providing information about students with disabilities and how we support them here.
Perfect. Allison, thank you so much for being here. It's going to be really helpful for all of our families to know. Make this process even easier than it already is, right? Let's see. So just housekeeping, a rule of thumb is this is a live chat, so you're more than welcome to write in the chat any questions you may have, any concerns, and we'll do our very best to answer them. If we don't answer them in the live chat, then we'll come back later and make sure that your questions are answered after the chat is over. So the first thing I want to move to is we want to talk about what is the Disability Resource Center?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the Disability Resource Center is the center that's there to help provide equal access and to programs, activities, and events at UNCW for students. And so it's important, that's why we exist here, is to make sure that students can have an equal opportunity to enjoy UNCW.
Oh, that's awesome. So what kind of events do you have?
So type of events that we have is we have different programs that have been recently developed. So we have an accessibility or matters Zoom meeting that is being created that actually our director is running. And then we also have a student intern that's working on different programs this year with regards to support for students as well.
Oh, perfect. And what would be some reasons a student would choose not to come to the Disability Resource Center?
So typically when we've finally talked to the student, the reason why they did not come to our office sooner was they either didn't know they had a disability or didn't know that they that their disability qualified under the ADA for accommodations, and also they didn't know or they maybe didn't have a great experience in high school, and so they were like, I don't want to use accommodations, or I don't want to have to deal with that again. And then some of them are just like, I want to see if I can do it on my own and see how I do. And so a lot of times that's usually, those are usually the reasons why they don't register with our office.
Awesome.
So,
what would be some signs that a family member would kind of be able to tell if they need to encourage their student to come to the DRC, the Disability Resource Center?
Well, I mean, obviously, if their child had an IEP or 504 in high school, I definitely think it's a good idea to have them register with their office. Even if they don't want to use the accommodations, I always tell people it's better to err on the side of caution, where, you know, if you register with our office and accommodations are there, you don't have to send your letter to your instructors. So if something happens, they're then available for you. But this way, the student has already gone through the process, we've already got the documentation, and they're not trying to frantically get everything together at that time. So
Makes it a little bit less stressful.
Exactly.
For them, a lot easier. And that's the point too, is also making college life, that transition to college, smoother, and making sure that students have the resources available and know where to go when they need things.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, now that we've talked a little bit about like what the DRC has done, or what I call the DRC, the acronym for it, we're going to move on to, let's see, what would a student need to do to start receiving services?
So students would need to enroll in our office. So on our website, we have a link for student portal. So they would click on that and they would fill out, scroll to the bottom, and then fill out the pre-enrollment registration form. At that time, they can then upload any documentation they have. So if they had an IEP or 504, they can upload it at that time. If not, if they don't have documentation, they can still submit the form, the pre-enrollment registration form, And then there's a disability verification form on our website that they can print off and take to their doctor and have the doctor fill the form out and then submit it.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if they have already documented, and then they can also take the steps to go to their doctor to get something filled out if they realize it and bring it back to you.
Absolutely, yes.
Wow, it makes it easy. You can just upload it right on their website. Oh, wow, that's great. Does a student have to schedule an appointment, or is there walk-in hours? How do you guys do that?
So it's kind of both. They need to schedule an appointment if they're doing their enrollment meeting, because
Okay.
we schedule those for an hour. It takes time. We want to make sure we have the ability to talk to the student and find out how their disability impacts them.
Yeah.
But we do also offer virtual hours on Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays are 1 to 2 and Thursdays are 10 to 11, I believe. It's on our website for the specific times, but we offer those so students can pop in on Zoom and ask their questions there.
Yeah.
And students are also welcome to walk in if they have questions, but we're not able to have like a full blown, like, we'll get your accommodation set up at that time. And there's also, in doing it that way, we can't guarantee that someone's gonna be available to answer any questions. So at least with virtual hours and scheduling the appointment, that you guarantee to have the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, it sounds like a pretty simple process. Just you simply enroll online. You end up uploading all the documentation. You make your appointment for the 1 hour to assess the needs and what the student would need.
Yes.
And then they have walk-in hours, and they can. So they have walk-in hours, and they can also make appointments and virtual. So there's so many different options to get in touch with them, to have their questions answered throughout the semester. Wow, that's a lot of opportunities to get in touch with you all. Like, that's great.
Yeah, we try to make it as welcoming and as accessible as possible. So
that's awesome. Is there any other information that you think that students would need to know when either they're starting their initial process or throughout as the years that they use the services? Anything else you can think of that would be important?
Yeah, so the two things that come to mind are that it's important for students to be self-advocates. So if they are having any difficulties or having any problems or have any questions, to reach out to our office as soon as possible to get that process started or to get the answers to their questions sooner rather than later. Because the longer they wait, the harder it is to help support them and find the resources to help them with their difficulty. And then the other thing is just that students, a lot of people think that registering with their office means it's going to be put on their transcript, and that is not the case. It's kept completely separate. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that students can register with their office, and then they have the choice as to whether or not they want to notify their professors. So if they don't want to use their accommodations or let a professor know that they have accommodations, then they don't have to do that. So it's you can still register with our office, and you still have the ability to make that decision. So
the student has more responsibilities and more kind of figuring out if they want to disclose their disability to professors or to other people. So it sounds like very confidential, like their information is really protected.
Yes, very much so. And unlike in high school where a teacher might have been like, hey, I think Timmy has a problem and wants to get them tested, and they get tested, and then mom and dad come in for the meetings, and all the teachers know, like, there is no, I don't want my math teacher to know, or I don't want everyone knows. So here it's like, if you don't want your math teacher to know, you don't have to send the accommodation letter, and your math teacher won't know that you have accommodations. I wouldn't recommend it, but and I don't recommend it to my students. But if that's what they want to do, then that's the choice they have as an adult. So.
What would be some reasons why a student wouldn't want to disclose to their professor, like accommodations?
It's hard to say. I mean, sometimes, again, they're like, I don't need any accommodations for the class. Like, it might be, quote unquote, easier class for them, where they feel that the professor gives them plenty of time, that they don't need extra time on an exam, or, they have plenty of time to get an assignment in, so they feel they're able to do it or something like that. So sometimes that's the case, where it's just they already are being accommodated, so they don't need to
Oh, okay.
ask for an accommodation on top of it.
So it's based on like their need and then maybe comfort
Exactly.
level of like where they're at.
Exactly.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So some classes you don't need it if it's not. So what would be some of the accommodations that you could provide for certain? And that might be a wide variety. I probably asked it very wide.
So it's also very individualized. So it's
Yeah.
based on the student's disability and how it
Yeah.
impacts them. But the usuals that everyone thinks of when they think of accommodations are testing accommodations, so like extended time for exams and reduced distraction environment. There are accommodations that allow students to audio record the lectures and get copies of lecture presentations. So that way they can follow along with the class lecture and taking notes more easily. So it really, there's a variety. It just depends on the student's disability and how they're impacted. So.
Wow, I get to learn from this too. That's really great. A lot of resources. We did have a question come in from the live chat.
Okay.
And it's families are wondering, what is the process for requesting housing accommodations?
That's a great question. So that is similar. They still need to fill out the pre-enrollment registration form online, the student does, and they need to submit documentation, but there's also a ADA housing form that needs to be filled out.
Okay.
Which is also online under the housing accommodation request. So they fill out that form. And then what happens is when we get that documentation, we will review it as a team. The disability office resource center will review it as a team. And then we will either email the student to be like, hey, we need more documentation, or consult other departments if we need clarification about the impact of this disability. And then also, if it's just determined that the student should have that accommodation, then I will email housing to let them know that this student has been approved for the following accommodation.
Oh, wow.
And then housing will contact them to say, here is, we got these approved accommodations. Here's the place that meets those accommodations.
Oh, perfect.
Sign here to
So
accept.
if they need any housing accommodations, then they start with you.
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, with the DRC. Yep.
With the DRC, and then the DRC is kind of shares it with housing, what accommodations were made for anyone who has documented disabilities, right?
Yes, that way they don't have to share documentation with housing. Housing actually does not want them to share their documentation. So that's why it comes through our office, the whole confidentiality piece. Perfect.
And then that way the student's information is confidential. No one extra has to know if they don't want them to know.
Exactly.
And it seems like it makes it a lot more. So that can be really difficult to be going through all these challenges too.
Yeah. And one thing to add is that we do ask that people submit this documentation as soon as possible. There are dates which we haven't updated our website to show for the next semester yet, but the sooner the better, because waiting until the end, there's no guarantee there's going to be rooms available. There's no, if we need other documentation, that might take more time to get that information. So that's why it's like, if you can get it done
Earlier.
Earlier the better.
Oh yeah, definitely for planning purposes and making sure that we have everything in time and everything is, because you never know what can come up and then you need more things and that takes more time and then you don't want to run out of that opportunity.
Exactly.
That accommodation just because of room and space too.
Exactly.
So now that we talked a little bit more about that, let's go ahead and talk about what are some of the students' roles and responsibilities. So we talked about them being as like a self-advocate for themselves.
Yes.
But what would be some of the responsibilities a student would have in managing their own disability?
Yeah, so when it comes to our office, their responsibility is obviously disclosing that they have a disability and registering with our office and submitting documentation. And then once we have the enrollment meeting and they are provided with accommodations, it's the student's responsibility to send their accommodation letters. And then also to follow up with the professors after they've sent the accommodation letter to the professor. They want to make sure that the professor got the email, that they read the email, and then also discuss their accommodations, like how are they going to be implemented in that particular class. So if it is extra time, like are they going to be taking it in the classroom, or is the professor have a room across the hall that they've set aside for students with extra time, or are they like, come take it in my office, or in the department's conference room, or they're like, no, take it in the DRC, that kind of thing. And then if a student has an accommodation for attendance or assignments or something like that, then they would need to talk to the professor about how that's supposed to look with regards to how many days, and get that information squared away, so that that way they know if and when they need to use that accommodation, how it will work.
Oh, that's perfect. So it's like making sure they're communicating, knowing the expectations, and understanding more about like what is expected of them as they're transitioning maybe from high school to college, and maybe their families aren't as involved with that process. So that leads me to my next question.
Well, there's two other things before you go on. So it's also the student's responsibility to contact our office immediately if they have any problems with getting their accommodations. And then the other one is that when it comes to taking exams in the DRC, if that is the case, we ask that students schedule the exams at least 4 business days in advance to ensure that we actually have the space to provide that. So that's the other, those are the other 2 responsibilities that we ask.
To being able to like schedule their own exams and communicate with you guys as well.
Exactly, yes.
Oh, perfect. Are families allowed to know their students' information or ask? So if I have a family member that calls you guys, are you allowed to release information?
So no, unless the student has signed the FERPA waiver, as well as a release of information form that we have available through the student portal that students can access and fill out. And so if a parent has a concern, or they're like calling us up and they say, hey, Mike, I'm really concerned because Timmy's not going to class and he's telling me he's really struggling. And then we look in our system and see we don't have a form from Timmy. We'll be like, thank you so much for contacting us. We've made a note and we'll do what we can. And then we hang up, and then we go and contact Timmy and find out what's going on. But if they have signed one, then we will be able to actually have a conversation, be like, okay, well, how long has this been going on? You know, is there anything outside environmentally that you think is impacting it? You know, is there a medication situation going on? Are there other resources that we could help get Timmy connected to? Kind of thing. So,
oh wow,
if they're concerned about that, we always say, have your kid sign the form.
So if the student has the opportunity to pick who knows and who doesn't, who can enter, so they are responsible for their own, unless they want their families or parents involved.
Exactly.
Oh, awesome. So they have that right.
Yes,
That's great. Good to know.
That's adulthood.
Yeah, right. That transition from high school is very different.
Yes.
From like teachers being like more involved, and then first like professors like, hey, it's up to you if you want me to know. Very different. So that's the kind of an adjustment for anyone who might be the first semester.
Yes. Yes, it's adjustment for students as well as for parents, and just you know, trying to get push their kids to do what they would normally have done in high school for them. So
awesome. So it seems like the advice for parents would be to encourage your students to do it or have them sign the form.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. One more question. What would a student do? Oh yeah, we already talked about this. We didn't have access to the form. Actually, you answered that already.
Yeah. The student portal is where the form is found. It's the release of information form. So
awesome. And then what would be the website that parents could go to see some of the forms or more information about the data?
Sure. So it's www.uncw.edu/disability. That's what it is currently. Our websites are under construction, so yeah, that's the one.
Awesome. So there's plenty more information on there. I was scouring their website earlier this week and trying to learn more information as well. Feel free to visit their website in the meantime. Again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Jen, Jennifer, for being here. Just remember that we do this usually on a monthly basis. And then our sessions are recorded and put on Facebook Live and on Facebook Live and YouTube. And if you wish to come back later, feel free to watch as much as you need to, or contact their office as well. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You can email the transitions web programs at transitions@uncw.edu. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day.